Hello, disappointed Packers fans, wherever you may be. It's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast. Before we talk about the game last night against the Jets, of course, keep in mind it was a preseason game. But before we talk about that game, I just want to send a special thanks out to everyone who's watching this video because we actually succeeded in our goal of getting to 5,000 subs before the start of the season, 28 days before week one. So I want to really say that I appreciate each and every one of you that's given me a sub. And also give a like to this video. It really helps us, especially since Packers fans are probably not going to be watching a lot of Packer content for the next day or so. And that's understandable. But we would really appreciate your support now. We're going to stretch that out to try to get to 6,000 by the start of the season. You knew I was going to extend the goal, right? We weren't just going to say, we got our 5,000. We'll just sit here till the start of the season. Nope, we'd love to get to 6,000. So please, if you haven't already done so, give us a subscribe and let's have an honest opinion about the game. That was a horrible performance for your Green Bay Packers. I was excited all day, as I'm sure the rest of you were, to watch the Green Bay Packers face an opponent instead of themselves in training camp. And the bottom line is the Jets wanted this game more. They have a new coach. They have a lot of mediocrity to address from last year. And you could see which team wanted this game a lot more. I'm not giving any excuses to the Green Bay Packers for their performance. I'm sure Matt LaFleur is going to give them an earful for the next week. Sometimes I get on to do a video and I'm very excited. I throw on a jersey because at the core of this, I am a fan, and while I am attempting to be a journalist in some phases of these streams, the truth of the matter is I am a fan. I'm always going to be a fan. So it was difficult to come on today and do this video. There was a part of me that was like, let's just do it on Monday and have some time to process this. But no, I got up this morning. I fought through watching the Coaches 22. It was not a fun exercise, but it was important to really get a feel for what went right and what went wrong in this game. There were a few things that went right. Matthew Golden clearly shows that he's, in my opinion, the best receiver on this roster, at least the best receiver that was on the field last night. He made some good plays. He drew some penalties. He was doing a lot of good stuff out there. He was running good routes. So that's one of the things we could do. The next thing we could talk about, and I think this is a message to the Packers and the fans out there, sometimes you just need to get a stinker out of your system and flush it down the toilet. And this was a really stinker of a performance. But let's try to talk through a couple of things I saw in the All 22 that are worth talking about. And then in closing, what I want to do is actually watch the response of Matt LaFleur in his press conference, and we'll react to that because I think that is the biggest thing that comes out of this game is how Matt LaFleur and the coaches react and get their team motivated to have a better performance next week. Next week, they are up against what, in my opinion, a better team in the Colts than they were against the Jets last night. So I would love to see a week of good joint practices with the Colts and then see the Packers make some significant improvements. I don't know how much of the starters we're going to see next week in the actual preseason game. So what I'm going to be really digging into next week is how our first team offense and first team defense does against the Colts, because the Colts actually have a very solid offensive line. They have a much better overall group of receivers than I think the Jets have. And they have a lot more pieces that concern me than the New York Jets. If it was week 1 against the Jets and our starters were out against the Jet starters for the whole game, I have no doubt that the Green Bay Packers would have won that game last night. But some things that I really want to talk about is in the broadcast they really focused on drops, and there were more drops than there should have been. There were some very clear catchable balls that were dropped. My actual drop count was 3, and I think at some point in the broadcast they were up to like 6 or 7. And they were counting things that, in my opinion, were either balls that were off target. In particular, Malik Willis had a couple that were significantly off target that were still considered drops by the broadcast, but I think the ball placement just wasn't where it needed to be for the receiver. Could it have been caught on some of those situations? Yes. But do I think it was a easily catchable ball? I have to say no. So some of those drops I took out of my tally. So I ended up with 3 actual drops with the first and second group. I didn't worry about the third or fourth group because then we're talking about players that probably aren't going to be on the field for the Packers this year. So that's just something I wanted to talk about, is that there were some passes that were considered drops that, in my opinion, were contested or the ball was not placed correctly. Especially looking at the all-22, you could get a better feel sometimes about coverage and what the quarterback was looking at, what the receiver was looking at, and where the ball was placed. And in some of those situations, especially looking at the all-22, I didn't feel like some of the things that were called drops were actually drops. They were more contested or they were badly placed balls. So that's some stuff that the Green Bay Packers can obviously clean up in practice. I do want to address that Jayden Reed was seen wearing a walking boot on the sideline, and that's been a source of a lot of social media chatter and concern. My guess would be, and it's just my guess, is because we haven't heard anything from the team yet, but Jayden Reed probably has a bad sprain and they want to keep it as immobile as possible. The reason I'm saying that is because he was actually walking on the field in a walking boot. If it was a more serious issue like a break or a fracture, I think they would have kept him completely off of his foot. The fact that they had him in the boot makes me think he has a sprain or a bad sprain, and it was really just precautionary. So I would expect him to miss. If that is the case, if it's just a sprain, then I would expect him to be back in practice next week, not this coming week. So I would expect Jayden Reed not to be in practice this week if it is a bad sprain. That's just my guess. Hopefully the team will have an update for us on Tuesday at practice. There is no practice on Monday, so I don't think we're going to get a lot of Packers news on Monday. But if we do, we'll be here for it. Next thing I want to talk about, Anthony Belton had a very bad night. I'm excited about the prospect of Anthony Belton, but the product last night was not very good. There were several situations where Anthony Belton was beat consistently play after play. Especially concerning to me is there was one play that ended up, I'm pretty sure it ended up being a sack. Yeah, it ended up being a sack where a player went between Anthony Belton and I believe it was Sean Ryan right up the middle. And the concern I have for that is Anthony Belton, that's a relatively easy play for Anthony Belton. It was a bull rush up the middle in the seam between the guard and Anthony Belton. Again, I think it was Sean Ryan. It might have been Monk, though. I'm not sure. I'll have to double check. But in either case, all you have to do there is the guard and the tackle have to slide together and block that bull rush. It would be a 2 against 1, and then the defender would have to cycle back out and try to speed rush on the outside, and that would have given the quarterback enough time to get rid of the ball. But Anthony Belton, his job is to really push in to the guard and seal that gap, and he did not do that. That gap was wide open, and they went in and got a sack. That is the type of thing that Anthony Belton really needs to work on. And it should be an easy play for Anthony Belton because of his size. Moving in towards the guard is much easier for him than dealing with speed rushes on the outside. So that's really something Anthony Belton and the coaching staff really need to work on for him. But he's a second round pick. This is his first play against true NFL caliber players. So other than his teammates, so it's not a surprise that we're seeing some issues there. One positive note I do want to say, I think Jordan Morgan appeared to play fairly well. When he was on the left side, I saw far more pressure coming on the right side from the Jets than the left side. So that tells me that Jordan Morgan was actually holding up fairly well yesterday. And that is a positive. So we're trying to find some positives here. Pass rush. Pass rush was not where it needed to be early in the game, and it led to easy throws for the Jets, and that needs to be fixed. We saw, obviously, Fields leave the pocket for some good runs, including a touchdown run. But a bigger concern for me is the defensive line was not getting enough pressure, and the Jets were just getting easy dump-off throws in the gaps consistently. You know, the whole method to the madness of the scheme that the Packers were playing, and it was a very vanilla scheme last night on defense, was to leave gaps, but to get to the quarterback fast enough that the team can't exploit it. When a team stops the blitz consistently and they realize that they have people open on checkdowns, it's easy money for the quarterback. And I think that's what we saw a lot of throughout the game last night. Lack of pressure was allowing the Jets to get really easy passes for completions and first downs. So that's something that has to change. I do think, at least when the starters were out there, the number one defense, they were very stout against the run. So let's take that as a positive. It was only when the 2s and 3s that were out there did the Jets really get a lot of success in the running game. So I'm trying to find some positives here. We're trying to find the rainbow at the end of the storm, right? So I would say that was a positive, that they did fairly well against the run with their starting defense. One of the things that I clearly noticed, and my wife, who loves to watch Matt LaFleur anytime he's on the camera, as I've told you many times, she's really tuned in to Matt LaFleur. And she said, wow, he is really pissed off on the sidelines, which is 100% true. You could see every time they showed Matt LaFleur, he was not happy with this Green Bay Packers performance. And I think Matt has been fiery and more aggressive from what I've seen in training camp and practice this year. He's gotten very hot at his players when they're not executing well, and I think he is going to be all over them this coming week to try to clean up some of these issues. So, and we're going to watch Matt LaFleur's presser in just a minute. So there were some positives out of this game. And sometimes the biggest positive is actually stinking it up so bad that you stop reading your press clippings, you stop hearing about what's going on, you start really focusing in on what you need to do the next week. So, was this a bad game? Yes, it was a bad game. But I would much rather have a bad game or two in the preseason and then come in tuned in for the Lions on week 1 because you've learned from those mistakes than maybe having an easy preseason and then having a stinker game against the Lions on week 1. So let's hope that they got their stinker out of the way, and the next 2 preseason games are going to be very competitive, and we can find reasons for optimism for week number 1. So that's my notes from watching the All 22. There wasn't a lot of good stuff to talk about, and I really don't want to just dump on this team constantly about everything that went wrong. So I tried to highlight a couple good things there from the All 22. And what I'd like to do now is we're going to go ahead and now look at Matt LaFleur's press conference and try to react to that, because I think this is the biggest thing that's going to matter for the Packers in the next week, is how Matt LaFleur and the rest of the coaching staff can get these players focused in and work on these mistakes. So let's take a minute. I'm going to go ahead and share this. And thanks again to Packers.com for covering the press conference. Obviously, they are the ones that you're going to go to for the press conference, right? So thank you, Packers.com, for this. And we're going to react. We're not just going to watch the video. We're going to pause. We're going to react to what Matt LaFleur says. But I really think the most we could get out of this exercise, this post-mortem, if you will, is to listen to what Matt LaFleur has to say and then react to that and look at next steps for the coming week against the Colts. So let's hear from the man himself, Matt LaFleur.
Too many penalties, drops, missed tackles, bad decision making, and it really showed up in every phase of football. And if you do that, you're going to get your ass kicked, and that's exactly what happened.
All right, so I love to hear this from Matt. There's great leaders are able to just say, hey, that sucked. We did a horrible job, and let's get better, which I think is what Matt is saying here right now. There's no sugarcoating. There's no excuses. There's no laying the blame anywhere else. Like the refs, it's clearly the Packers' responsibility to get better. And this is a good commentary on leadership from Matt LaFleur. Sometimes you just got to say, we fucked up, and move on. So those of you who may or may not know, I actually served in the National Guard for 7 years. And one of the things that we learned in the military, and I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent, I'll promise you, is when you make a mistake, you take responsibility for it, you take ownership, and you move on and do better. So that type of mentality is kind of what the Green Bay Packers need right now, to say, hey, we had an awful game, an awful game. Let's get back into practice against an opposition for a couple days and come out and have a good preseason game on Saturday. So let's hear some more from Matt.
You've got to make the decision every year on whether to play the starters or not. Thought the starting offense didn't really do a lot. Do you still feel like you got value out of getting them out there?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of value. I think it's a good lesson. Like, you better get your mind right, ready to play football. And I mean, it's a gladiator sport, and if you don't, you're going to get humbled really quickly. But I do think there's a lot of value. Like I talked about, just, we're going to be playing some night games. It's good to, hopefully we can clean up some things along the way in our process of getting ready for a football game. And, our guys, I think there's a lot to learn from this experience.
Your number.
All right, so again, Matt is emphasizing the fact that, hey, sometimes when you get your butt kicked, it's going to help your starters especially get their mind right about moving forward. And this is really good commentary. I'm sure Matt is going to have much more expletive-filled commentary for the team, probably for the next week or so. But this is a good job of getting to the essence of what he needs to share, not to just the players, but also to the fans for the Green Bay Packers as well, that, hey, we need to do better. This team needs to get their mind right and do better, and that's great to hear.
Line had several penalties. I guess in the grand scheme of like the preseason, what have you thought about them in comparison to tonight? So are you worried about what you saw tonight, or is it kind of just...
I think if you're not concerned about it, then you're probably not pushing as hard as you should be. So, yeah, I'm definitely concerned about it. Like anytime you just play with poor technique and poor fundamentals, and then you're making bad decisions, and it's hard to play the game of football if you get called for a holding penalty it seemed like every other play.
Will you guys adjust or change any of the work you had planned this week based on tonight?
Probably not. If anything, we'll push a little harder.
You mentioned the bad decisions. Was that Hardman on the punt, on the muff punt? Is that a bad decision to field the bouncing ball there, or is that an acceptable risk there?
I got to go back and take a peek at it just and see how far back we were. I mean, I don't know if we were aligned at the right, distance back. I think it seems like a pretty routine play that happens more often than not, where you can scoop that punt up. I was disappointed with that, but also, we can't field a punt on the 5-yard line. So those were obviously two bad decisions.
So something I want to talk on, and I didn't talk about Hardman yet, so it is something I wanted to talk about. So Matt, thanks for bringing that up. Mecole Hardman is primarily going to be on this team as a returner, and he did a horrible job this past week. If Hardman does not show significant improvement in the next 2 preseason games, I don't know if he makes this roster. I know they gave him a decent contract, but very little of it was guaranteed. So I think they could walk away from Hardman if he doesn't show real significant value at the position. There were 2 mistakes that he made that I saw. One, obviously he muffed a punt, which was then picked up by the Jets. And number 2, he fielded a ball at the 5-yard line when he could have let it bounce into the end zone and it would have been ball at the 20. So those are 2 things that I saw that were very concerning for Hardman last night. Hopefully he just had a bad night and he can improve. But if the Packers don't see a significant value in having him as an asset in the return game, and he was not an asset last night, I don't know if he makes this roster.
Are there things that have happened in practice in terms of sustaining a drive in practice that maybe showed up tonight? Similar things that you've been concerned about the last 2 weeks?
Well, I think a lot of things showed up tonight that I really wasn't necessarily anticipating. Like all those penalties were a major problem, and it's hard to get into any type of rhythm when you're having multiple penalties. I mean, you have a short yardage situation, 3rd and 1. It looks like it's going to be an easy first down, and you get called for a holding. I mean, you just can't have those.
So, Matt, do you need to officiate practice more closely to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you gotta look at everything.
So
I mean, there was a lot of penalties both sides of the ball tonight, and that I would say it's pretty typical early on, especially in preseason into the early stages of the regular season. But definitely got to work a lot on our techniques so we don't put ourselves in those types of positions.
So when it comes to preseason.
So that was a really good point by Matt. The multiple holding penalties on the same drive and even in the same series causing you like a 2nd and 25 or something ridiculous like that is not going to get us success in the game. No offense is designed for 3rd and 25. 3rd and 29. I saw that a couple times last night. That you're just basically going to run it up the middle, which is what the Packers did, and then punt. So that was a big part of the offense struggling so much last night, and they have to work on that. And if you watched the broadcast, and if you didn't, and you want to watch it, Baldinger did a great job at half commentating on how sometimes you need to just use really good technique and you just have to let it go. All right. So one of the things I consistently saw, especially in the coaches 22, was the holds were pretty egregious. They were not wobblers or it could have gone either way, or it was just both players fighting. There were lots of grabs that at some point you got to just say, you know what, I got beat. I'm going to try to stay in front of you as much as I can and slow you down. But holding you is not going to be the answer. Sometimes you got to literally put your hands up and just use the rest of your body as much as possible, because there were lots of holds that were very clearly holds. Now, the good news is that's a teachable moment. That is something that the Packers can take into practice this week and make sure that they're doing drills where it's like at some point you just got to put your hands up and and use your body as much as possible. But if you hold, it's going to be worse than just letting the opposition through. Now, there are holds that you have to do. If you are a tackle or a guard and it looks like Jordan Love is about to get sacked in a very bad way and he's going to get significantly hurt possibly, that's when you just have to grab a guy, bear hug him, and hold him. But a lot of the holds that were called last night were preventable holds. They should have just gotten their body in front of them, done as much as they could, and then released the opposition into the backfield, knowing that the quarterback has at least enough time to see what's coming. Holds, in my opinion, that are acceptable is when you have a blindside guy who's about to come in and tackle the quarterback, and it's either you tackle him or your quarterback could get hurt. That's where holds become more acceptable. But a lot of the holds I saw last night were just bad technique and not letting the play go. At some point, you've got to say, you know what, I'm beat. I'm not going to hold the guy and make it worse. And we saw a lot of that last night.
I understand you're pissed, and I get it. How do you keep it in perspective that, you're playing without three of your top wide receivers?
Yeah, bottom line, though, is you just don't want to put bad football out there. And so whether it's preseason or not, it's a little disappointing, I would say. So we got the thing about it is you got to have the urgency to fix it, and it's got to get fixed fast because, the regular season is going to be here in no time.
So
Yep. 27 days, Matt. You're right about that.
You would think about playing your starters again in Indy, or would that be too much of a?
Yeah, probably not gonna do that. If I'm being honest with you guys right now, obviously things could change. They're always subject to change. So we'll see how these next couple days of practice go. We'll see how we practice versus Indy, and make a decision after that.
All right, so this is really important feedback from Matt, and I think it's very smart. He's decided that he's not going to put his starters out there probably for the game against the Colts. And that's really not necessary because the most value that the Packers are going to get from next week is going to be the inter-team scrimmages that they're having with the Colts, because it is contact, it is against opposition, but there is safeguards in place. So for these inter-team scrimmages, they do not allow tackling of the quarterback. So all the quarterbacks are still going to be in their red protective jerseys, as well as players that have injuries. And the rule for these these scrimmages is, you can touch the quarterback and that will count as a sack. So they're still going to be rushing Jordan Love, and they're still going to be tackling players that have red jerseys, but it's going to be with the intention not to cause any injuries. So Jordan Love and the starting players can still get the same game reps as they would in the preseason game in practice, with the protection that we know Jordan Love isn't going to get sacked and get hurt or something along those lines. So it really does make a lot of sense for the Green Bay Packers to have these inter-team scrimmages for the next 2 weeks. They're doing it against the Colts and they're doing it against the Seahawks. So I am very happy that the Green Bay Packers are going to be in a situation where they are going to have these inter-team scrimmages before the regular season. The fact that they're going to compete against the Colts all for several practices this week before the game against the Colts is really good news for the Packers.
Reed looked like he was in a walking boot. Is that related to the toe injury that had him on the NFI going into camp, or is this something different?
No, from my understanding, it's something different. So, it's unfortunate, but hopefully we'll get him back before the regular season.
Is there any concern that he won't?
All right. So that was the comment on Matt LaFleur, going back to the Jaden Reed scene with the walking boot. It's not his toe injury, it's something else. Again, I go back to the fact that it's probably just a sprain and they want him ready for the start of the season.
Actually, I think anytime you see a guy in a boot, that's a concern.
Anderson or White, did either of those look real concerning?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on with White. I know all I was told was a foot. I think he hit a nerve or something and couldn't feel his foot. But and then Zane's got a knee, so we'll see. I don't know the extent of it right now.
Obviously, Lamar Johnson has one good play for you there at the end. What have you thought of his big picture through 2 weeks here?
Yeah, I thought it was a good showing for him. I thought he ran hard and obviously flashed some playmaking ability, and so he'll probably earn some more opportunities next week.
Matt, did you get a chance to see what George Morgan did tonight and just any impressions?
Yeah, I would be lying to you if I got to go back and watch the tape on that.
Did Stenovich call the plays? Did you just split those between a couple of him and Vrabel, or how'd you do that?
No, Steno did, but Steno's been calling it for the last couple preseasons, so.
Two more, please.
When did McNamee get into town?
At about 11 p.m. last night.
I don't think you kicked Hale last year. Would you want to give this guy some opportunities and get him?
We'll see. Yeah, he handled all the kickoffs, and we'll see how he responds. It was his first exposure with him was tonight. So, but I thought he came in and did a nice job.
It's never good when you're talking about a punter, but did Daniel have a good night at least?
Sure seemed like it. I mean, I'm sure his leg's a little sore than we'd like it to be. Definitely had to use him.
Nice
more than we
comment,
wanted
Matt.
to.
Nice. All right. So that is what we have from Matt LaFleur. Once again, thank you to Packers.com for the press conference. Really appreciate that and want to make sure they get credit for that. So we'll be back tomorrow. I've got to think about what we're going to talk about over the next couple days because we're not going to have notes from training camp. But there are things we could talk about, and we're going to talk about throughout this week about how the Packers can continue to build for Week 1. I firmly believe that Week 1 is a really, really important game. Not only is it setting the tone for the whole season, but it's against the Detroit Lions, who have a very tough schedule after this game with the Packers. They have several games on the road, and if the Packers can win Week 1, not only does it give them an obvious benefit in winning in the division, which is key, but I really think it's going to impact the Lions in a way that might compound over multiple weeks. So I'm probably going to dive some more into what we can do to prepare for the Lions and get ready for week number 1. We're also, of course, going to be scouting the Colts before the game on the preseason game on Saturday, and just giving you news and notes from these inter-team scrimmages, which are going to be far more important than what happened last night and probably what's going to happen on Saturday night. These scrimmages against the Colts and next week against the Seahawks are really where things are going to come together for the Green Bay Packers. So if we hear good things from practice against the Colts and against the Seahawks, I'm going to feel far more better about that than feeling negative about what happened in this preseason game. Now, I usually like to conclude these streams with a go Pack go, but I really don't feel like it today. So I'm just going to say I'll see you later, and hopefully we can get back to that go Pack go spirit next week. But, this was a really hard loss. Not only did I have to watch it last night with the broadcast, but then I watched it with the All 22 this morning. So I've seen it twice. So I'm feeling a little deflated right now, probably like the Packers and Matt LaFleur are feeling. But sometimes you have to step away from a bad loss, and the Packers are going to have today and Monday off to really kind of reflect on what happened in this game and hopefully come back into practice on Tuesday focused and ready for a great week of practice. So we'll see you for another video tomorrow. And once again, sincerely, thank you for helping us reach the goal of 5,000 subs. Getting to that number, which I thought was a stretch before the start of the season, a month before the season, really tells me that we're having some success here, and we'll keep grinding along with the Green Bay Packers as they get ready for hopefully a deep run in the playoffs this year. And you know what? What the heck? Go Pack go. We're going to shrug this off and have a better week next week. Talk to you then.